Hello everyone, and Fortune here again, and welcome to another video. Welcome. If you're new, please hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, I know why you're here. You want to know how to build a calculator, and that's why I'm here to help you. So today we're going to be building a calculator, hence the name of the video. So simply just open your favorite text editor, and I'm using Visual Studio Code. It's my favorite and perhaps might be your favorite too. So you could go to any search engine and then just type Visual Studio Code and you can download it. It's free, so makes it even tastier, right? But so I simply just hit Control 1 and I get this boilerplate code. Pretty easy, right? So I'm just gonna attach my JavaScript file, right? So we can add some dynamic to our calculator. Okay, so say script src script.js. Cool. And just add to fair here and we're ready. Okay, so to build a calculator you're going to need a form tag, and a table tag, and that's essentially it. And then everything, all the good stuff, the juicy stuff, happens in JavaScript. So firstly, I'm gonna walk you through this, so let's go. Let's jump right in. So I'm gonna create the form, use the form tag, and I'm gonna give it a name, calc, short for calculator, obviously. And then give it an ID as well of calc, and then go ahead and type in the table element. And yeah, you could perhaps give that a border of 4 actually, just so the border within the form has a border of 4. It's a bit tidier. And then go ahead and type your tr element for the table, and then td, and then go ahead and type div. Okay, go ahead and type div and perhaps align that center. Then within that div tab, just type the input type text, and this is where where you type in, where you select any button like 1 + 1 and 2 displays. It's going to display in this particular input. Okay, so input type text, and we're going to give it an ID attribute, and we're going to simply name it or assign it the string text result screen. Yeah, as is the result screen really. So, and close that, and let's actually open up our browser, see what's going on. Okay, go live. I'm just going to drag it here. Okay, open that up. Cool. I'm just going to zoom in. So this is the screen essentially. Like, we're going to have buttons here, right? And then like we're just going to type our buttons, and then the result of the equation is going to display in this input. And it's strange because it's an input really, right? But we can make an input display our previous input. So, well, display our data. So that's what we're simply going to do to build this calculator. So jump back into your favorite text editor, and simply after the end tr tag, simply just type tr again. Okay, td, and maybe give this a border of 111. And Control S, yeah, it's coming along there. And also just type in the inputs now. Okay, so these are the buttons really. So input type button, it's an input, so meaning that the user can input, we can input, but specifically it's a type of button rather than a text. Simple, right? And we're going to give this an ID of 1 and give it a value. Okay, give it a value of space 1 space and close that, and then we have our first button. Pretty cool, right? It is pretty neat. So we can do that again. So input type button, an ID of 2, give it a value of 2. Okay, I'll make sure to space that L, keeping things tidy, and let's move this a bit further so the space. Okay, save. Now we have 2. I'm just gonna copy this line just so I have a reference of it. S, so it tidies things up for me. That's why I love Visual Studio Code. Once I press Ctrl S, it tidies it up for me instantly, so which is pretty neat. So I'm gonna copy that again and then change 2 to 3, and then the last input we're gonna just simply say, we're gonna give it an ID of the plus operator and also give the same value, and then we have our first line of the calculator. Pretty neat, right? But notice how this space here, like there's no way we could just say 4, like 1 2 3 4 and then a plus. Could work, but perhaps would be a bit squashed in. We're trying to be neat here, okay? Well, as neat as possible. The neating or the styling really happens in CSS, which you can tinker around with after this video, okay? So, but firstly, I'm gonna wrap these input in a div, okay? And I'm gonna give this, I'm gonna assign this div. Well, I'm gonna align this div center, okay? Cool. Perfect. Okay, now they're center, so let's just get rocking. And that's just a line break, and then simply I am going to copy the above code. I do recommend you type it out just so you get used to the syntax and the feel of the elements really as you're typing it out. That's how you simply learn, practice really, and understanding of what's actually happening. So we have our 4 inputs up top and then 4 inputs below, and there's a line break in between. Notice if I didn't have this line break, what happens? Look, you get this unusual, interesting layout, which is not what we need at the moment. So go ahead and press Ctrl Z and Ctrl S. Cool. And now for the second row, second line essentially, we will say 4, give it a value of 4, let's see, 5 for the next one, and 6, and instead of plus, it's the minus operator. Correct. So just go ahead and just type in the minus there. Control S. What's happening? Cool. So Control S again, and now instead of 6 we have 7, 8, 9. And ID of 9 and the value of 9 too. And instead of plus, we might have the multiplication, and we just use the X text there. So this will be multiplication. So typically, for if you want to multiply two numbers, we use the star sign there, rather than the actual text. Okay, the text X, as you noticed it. So now we need our last line, really, last row of inputs. And so instead of 1, this is typically usually a clear button, correct? So I'm going to give it an ID of clear and the value of C. Neat. And then 0 instead of 2. And see the division /. And then last but not least, we have the equals. Perfect. That's okay. That's okay. But the size here, I'm not happy with it. I do know I could do better with CSS with it, but let's just do our best with HTML for the moment, okay? So go ahead and go up to the input with an ID attribute of result screen, and right after that just type in the size and perhaps type 16. See what happens. Okay, better, I guess. Not too bad, right? But let's get to the juicy stuff. Jump straight into JavaScript, and we need reference of our result screen since it's where the data is gonna display. Okay, so say let result screen equals document.get element by ID result screen. And now that we have result screen, we could say document.get element by ID 1, the first letter, and then .add event listener. So please listen for a click, and when you hear that click, please pass this function, please. And this function is simply just going to assign, make sure after that, it's going to simply assign the result screen dot value one, just like that. So meaning, like, what is essentially happening, like if I click 1 here, I can type in as many ones as I want, but not 2s though. Why is that? Because we haven't essentially accessed them using the DOM in our HTML document. Really, we've only accessed the string of 1. Okay, so meaning that in the document we have accessed the string of 1, and then we've told it to listen for a click, and specifically only for the string of 1. Well, the string of 1 that's assigned, well, the ID of 1. Okay, so meaning that if you go to HTML and the first input that we had an ID of 1. Okay, so that's the ID of that particular input, and simply we're going to assign it a function. So meaning that within the document, listen for clicks, particularly 1, and if so, will then assign the screen's value while assigning it to itself the string of 1, which is why we can click 1. So just to recap, just so you understand that concept, it's pretty simple, right? So essentially what we have done so far, we have got the screen using the ID, get element by ID method, and within the document, HTML, the document, and result screen is inside the document. So, and we need it since it's where the result is going to display. And so once we have that, we simply just say document.getElement by ID 1, and please add, when we're adding an event listener, essentially saying please listen for a click within the document, and if you hear that click, well, please pass this anonymous function, and this anonymous function is essentially assigning the result screen to itself, but assigning it the string of 1. Okay, so which is why we can type in 1 but not 2, because we've only accessed 1. Okay, so like, I know what you're thinking, Fortune, would you not just like hurry up and just copy and paste all of them like that for all of the other strings? I could, we could, but just like using our logic here, folks, like just to grab the ID attributes that we need to do our mathematics, really, for the calculator, just look at all of this code. It's really unnecessary, right? Like, we could, like, whenever you see a chunk of code like this for this simple task, you have to ask yourself, is there another way for me to write clean and concise code? Which more than likely there is. Just literally scope the web and do your research and think outside the box, and you will find that result. Because like the reason why I see this as unnecessary code is because, let's say this was in a website, this unnecessary code will typically slow down loading time for the user, because our main goal is to allow the user to get the job done. Well, allow the user to get inside the website and then do whatever they want to as quick as possible without wasting their time. Okay, so our goal is to help the user and essentially manage their time more efficiently and also not waste their time. So go ahead and just delete what we have done. Although it's a method that works, and I do recommend you do practice with it, that way you actually understand how we access the buttons, don't get me wrong, but in the long run there's a more efficient way, and the more efficient way is simply by accessing the entire calculator, which is why if you look back in our HTML file, we have the form element with an ID of calc, and that's simply inside that box called form. We have the table, we have the juicy stuff. Okay, so let's go straight into our JavaScript and then just say document dot get element by ID and simply say calc like before, dot add event listener. Listen for a click, please. And if you hear that click, we'll pass this anonymous function. And what this function is simply going to do is do the same thing, but a bit more efficiently. So, and it's literally going to be like 2 lines of code. We can already see it, like, because we have the calculator, all we literally have to say, could you please listen for a click? And if you, particularly if get the, well, think of it like get the inputs, and just when you press equals, well then please give me the evaluation of the particular inputs. And if you hear a click on the C on the clear input, will then just assign the result screen with nothing. You can already like tell how much code we're going to really be using. It's going to be less, right? Rather than going through each individual input. Okay. So what we need to do is simply say if the event.target.id is equal to, remember, triple equals is equal to equals, well then assign the result screen dot value, so the result screen's value with let's see for a moment, we might need to assign it with the evaluation really of its current value. That would make sense. Then we'll have to just say else if e.target.id is equal to clear, which it is once we click on it. So if it's equal to clear, well then get the result screen and simply assign it nothing to clear it. Pretty logical, right? Logical. And else we want to get the result screen value and assign it to itself while assigning e.target.id so interesting. That looks neat. Let's go ahead and see what's happening. Clear. Okay, we get clear. And let's start with a simple one. Cool. Okay. And we can do large numbers, whatever we want. And notice how there's an X, right? So if I just say 8 multiply, like a star sign comes up. 64, but we have a star here just for neat and clarification for the user really. And clear again, and then if I say divide it by 9, get 1, and then clear again. We can do whatever we want, and we can continue to play around with it as much as we want. But how did we do it? Like, the main important thing is our understanding of the actual code. Like, how is it functioning? Well, it's pretty logical. Once we have a result screen, once we have accessed our result screen from our HTML document, all we had to do was just write an event listener, passing an anonymous function, particularly listening for a click within the form element, and the function that's passed to that click is simply saying if the event or target is equal to equals, will then assign the result screen the evaluation. So the evaluation of the value of the screen, essentially. Like, if you look at like eval, like, it's essentially like it evaluates the current strings, right? Because if you look at our HTML, they're strings. Like, we know they're strings because there is quotation marks, and that's what the eval function or method essentially does. Like, it evaluates the the screen value. And no, because remember, the buttons are strings, and once they're inside this result screen, they're still strings, right? So that's why we can use the eval function to get the result that we want. Like we know, like for example, if you say eval on your console and just say like 2 plus 2, we get 4. So we already know already, like it evaluates. So and then if well then clear is equal to the target, is equal to the event or target or ID, which it is. Well then assign the result screen with nothing, and then else assign the result screen itself plus the event or target. So that's why, like, if we didn't have this, we wouldn't even be able to type. Like we'll be able to like actually see our inputs. That's why we need to assign it to itself. Okay, so hope we learned something new today, and the entire code is below, so make sure to check that out. And it's been a pleasure, and thank you folks, and I'll catch you all on the next movie.